Hello, good morning and welcome for Feed's uh, panel discussion on one of the most hot issue currently from India, that is Manipur. This is a very complex and also alarming situation, particularly started in the month of May, and at least for first 2 months, it was much more aggravated. Now the situation is relatively calmed down, but it's very important for all of us to go over the various facts around Manipur violence, get the historical perspective, what triggered the violence, what is the situation, what are the different aspects that impacting or fueling this violence. Also, why is it important for us to cover? Because while we are in United States, as Indian American, definitely the whatever the situations of India, one way or another, it impacts, and we become either ambassadors of India in some informal capacity, or people do ask the questions. And many times it is very important to have the broader and right perspective and the facts to brought out, particularly on the background that there are various um, people or organization with vicious interest. They may take the narrative to a different angle. What I have seen recently is that there are some folks, fringe element, trying to do some protest or some, like say, fasting type of things, or some organization trying to say that it's a ethnic cleansing. So those are the aspects which are incorrectly getting projected. So it is important to bring out the facts and look at the different angle and see that what's happening in Manipur, and so we set the correct or we reset the narratives, or we set the right perspective. So with me today, our two analysts are here. When it's Spandan Gandhi, and then we have Isha Gadkari. We have another analyst, Shaunak, who also contributed in this research. However, due to some emergency situation, he could not join. So we will start. So this format is going to be first 30 minutes. Mostly we will cover the different perspective, and then open the forum for either question answers or even the discussion. So all the attendees can also bring out their perspective if anything has missed out. But please hold on to that. Let's get the at least the relevant facts that we brought together. So I will first start now to understand this northeast state of India, which is Manipur. As name suggests, actually, this name came probably a few hundred years back, and that says that money is a jewel, and it's Manipur came because it's a jewel surrounded by the hills. So Imphal is a valley, which is about 10% of the entire Manipur, and that's the only kind of a portion where it's a valley, but it's a little bit flat land, and then surrounded by the hills. It's very densely forest, very green, beautiful area. And so let's go over the historical perspective. So I would like to Isha to start with that.
Yes. So essentially, the state of Manipur has a very complex history, which is equipped with a very diverse culture. And in order to understand the current state of Manipur, one really needs to delve deeper into the history of Manipur, as it is pivotal in understanding the complexities we see today. So basically, the history of Manipur starts with the Meitei Kingdom, which has been credited with originating the Manipuri language, the Manipuri dance form, etc. And the details of which are actually written in Puya, which is an ancient manuscript which also talks about the history of Manipur kings, all of which were Meitei, and they dated back to at least 2000 years. And the manuscript also talks about medicine, astronomy, religion, history, politics, which is why it is safe to say that Manipur history starts with the Meitei. They followed a religion called Sanamahism, and there still are people who follow that religion, although a lot of Meitei groups have become Vaishnavites now, and other religious groups as well. There is another ancient group which is called the Nagas, and it actually shared a common origin with the Meitei, but they have since grown apart. Even though there were quite a few disagreements between the Meitei and the Nagas, eventually a treaty was established between them, with the Meitei promising to protect the Nagas from foreign invasion. However, this treaty was later challenged and broken by the Burmese invasion. And another rather complex aspect of the Manipur history is the British involvement. But before I get to that, it is also important to understand the Burmese involvement. So in 1819 to 1825, the Burmese Empire was invaded and defeated. And they defeated the Meitei community and imposed the Burmese culture. In 1826, the British defeated the Burmese and took control of Manipur. Under the British, Manipur became a princely state, which basically meant that the king, who was a Meitei king, so in order for him to stay in power, he would have to pay heavy taxes to the British Empire. So because of this, the Manipur kingdom retaliated against British rule, but was defeated by the British Empire. So as a punishment, the British forced the Meitei community, which was far greater in number as compared to other ethnic groups in Manipur, to settle only in the valley part of Manipur, which is a much smaller share of land than they previously owned. So it was then that the British started Burmese influx and started habiting the Burmese tribal communities in the Manipur hilly region. So they used the classic divide and rule strategy to further create tensions between the community. And after habiting the Burmese tribal communities in Manipur, they then converted the tribal communities to Christianity. So these communities went on to ethnically cleanse the other tribal communities, particularly the Nagas. These Burmese influx went on to become the Kukis. So the habitation of Kukis in the Manipur hilly region, where Nagas previously resided, caused more tensions and changes in the demographics of the region.
So thanks, Isha, for bringing that perspective. Some of the aspects to highlight is a long history, is a complex history, is a tribal history. Multiple tribes are there, whether Meiteis, Kukis, Nagas, and also each one of them, they're not like say monolithic from the religious practices point of view. But tribe ethnicity point of view, they are different. Like say Metis is one ethnicity, Kukis are different ethnics. But in Metis, you can see that there are Vaishnavites mostly, that the Hindus, then Sanamais are there. Even there are Christians which are there, and then lot of the Meitei churches actually were also this time came into, they were burned by the Kukis, and then the Muslims, which they call as a Bengals or something. So it is a, but majority is actually Vaishnavites or Hindus from that perspective. Similarly, Kukis also has many Muslims, and they're mostly coming from, I think, East Bengal. So there are the Kukis actually coming from three regions. One is that definitely is now settled in the hilly regions of Manipur, but also the region of Burma, that is the largest source coming from Myanmar. And then it is coming from East Bengal also. So in these, there are different, I think, streams of influx are there, and their fault lines. So Isha, do you want to throw some lights on this? All the Kukis, they come in different time frames, same time frame. What's the current reality?
Yeah, so I think a lot of influx of the cookies was essentially during the Burmese invasion, so around 1819 to 1825. However, during the British rule, the Britishers, in order to create further divide in Manipur, they also, got like influxed or habited a lot of Burmese as cookies in Manipur. And then we see a lot of, we also see like current illegal immigration as cookies in Manipur. And this is also like very recent, like 2020-ish.
Yeah. So we need to understand the political situation in Myanmar to understand what happened. See, in what they call in Myanmar called 8888, that is 8 August 1988, there had been violence, and then military junta created. Basically, there are a lot of cookies or the Myanmar who were anti-government. They did the exodus, and many of them actually settled. That was now in between there in Myanmar itself, there were change of governments, etc. But again, in 2020, military junta took over, and then there was another second wave of, we can say, recent times influx. And all of those influx then settle into Manipur, and that's the impact of those are that the local, whether Metais, also Nagas, they thought that this is much more encroachment and illegal immigration, and then it's impacting their rights. So that was also one aspect. Couple of aspects I would like to bring the next as that how does it divide? The first thing that geographically, if you look at the terrain-wise, Metes, they are in the flatlands, in the valley, surrounded by all these different hills. 10% of the land is actually this in Imphal Valley, but that has almost 60% of the population. Now, 90% of the land is hilly land, which is actually mostly dominated by Kukis and Nagas. Nagas consider that this region as their homeland. So there are a lot of fault lines between Kukis and Nagas are also there, because Nagas think that they are original residents of this hilly area, and Kukis actually are taking their lands away. And then coming to this geographical, there is another aspect of that. Since 60% of the population in the Imphal, majority of the political power is actually in the hands of the Metais, though the land is small. However, when you go to hilly region, there is a Act 1960 Land Revenue and Land Reform Act. Because of that, the hilly area land, that the tribal land, cannot be transfer or from tribals to non-tribals. That can only be owned by tribals. So as a result of that, there is another fault line where is an economic type of things that while Metais feel that we have a smaller land and cookies can buy that, but at the same time, Metais cannot buy in the hilly region. So these are the different things that it comes up. Third most important, which recently triggered this, the whole violence, is that Manipur was a princely state, as Isha called out. And in 1949, when all these princely states merged into India, so in 1949, the treaty happened. During that, Metis lost their tribal status. Earlier, Britishers had called them as a tribe amongst the tribes in Manipur. And when they merged into India, they lost that tribal privileges. And that was the reason there was a petition pending. And in 2013, there was a letter from Union government asking state government to reply on the status of the Metais as a scheduled tribe or the tribe. And it was pending for a long time. This in the month of March, this acting judge, High Court judge of Manipur, he responded to that petition around about this, and then provided the ruling, say that government should respond to that letter, and also recommended to include Metis as scheduled tribe. Now, as the impact of that, you need to consider that once in India, when you add them as a scheduled tribe, it triggers the affirmative action. So it means that there are reservations, whether it's in terms of jobs, in terms of college admissions. So this is the immediately impact is there, economic impact. Means, of course, it is a positive impact on the Metis. However, now it is at whose cost? That becomes at the cost of cookies, because cookies were getting benefits of these reservations, and whether it is in educational institutions, job, and other side. Now it is going to be shared by Metis, and that created unrest in the cookies. So there were already these fault lines existing, and that results into the protest, because it will create, and that mainly came from the economic point of view. So I wanted to, so this is where the first trigger started, and I wanted to bring Spandan to cover the additional aspect in this unrest and the violences.
Yeah, so I'll just respond to you mentioned that this is how the violence broke out. So first, I'm just gonna bring up I'll just bring up one fact about the violence that I think is very, very important. And then I'll bring up kind of a more tangential point, but it is very relevant regarding the different insurgent groups and the history of insurgency in Manipur. So you rightly mentioned that a lot of this escalated in response to a protest against making the Meiteis and ST group a scheduled tribe. Now, amidst all of the violence, we've been seeing a lot of, Meitei, Kuki. There are insurgent groups that speak for these tribes, and there's a handful of them. Not only for the Nagas, there's a handful of insurgent groups that represent them, that claim to represent them. There's also many that claim to represent the Kuki people, but there's also terror outfits that say they represent the Meitei tribes, and it's not a majority of them. These are small, isolated groups, but I think the second, third week of May, when the violence was at its peak, the Central Police Forces actually arrested a group of the Kangleipak Communist Party, which is a terror outfit that claims to represent the Meitei group. They're a separatist group. They're a Maoist separatist group that's acting on behalf of the Meitei people. So when terms are thrown out like ethnic cleansing of Kukis in Manipur, that's certainly not what's playing out. What it is a lot of different groups with different agendas exploiting all of these fault lines that Kandirauji has pointed out for their own political agendas. And I also want to bring up, should I bring up also the history of the drug trade in Manipur right now?
Yeah, I think because this is additional dimension to that. So please throw some light on that. But one thing before moving to that, because many of Indian Americans and or mainstream Americans who are not familiar with the history would also, and many of them might have heard Manipur, even the name Manipur for the first time, right? And that's why we started with the history of Manipur, what Manipur is and all that thing. So they may not even know the history of the violence. So what I wanted to bring it out, it is that in the recent times, actually, all these terrorist activities or the insurgency movements were calmed down or the settled and negotiated and all that thing. However, a decade before, for the decades, there were a lot of violences and the insurgency activities were there. So, the history of violence and the tribal clashes is not a new in the region, though it might be the new for most of us who are now reading through that. So please go ahead, throw some light on that or bring that other aspect that you mentioned about how did this drugs or the opium thing is playing role into the current violence.
Yeah, like you said, it's been going on not only just between, actually, when I was researching, I don't want to, state this exactly, but there's been conflicts. Right now, the Meitei Kuki conflict is highlighted, but there's been conflict amongst the various tribal groups in Manipur. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. Something that's important to note, just so, like you said, we are talking to an American audiences. We mention insurgent groups, but we don't get a grasp of just how much political legitimacy some of these groups enjoy in the regions that they inhabit, which is particularly the hill regions, like you mentioned. So they have been active since 1964, and a little time after. I mean, Manipur's been designated as a disturbed area, and UFSPA's been active there for a long time. So yeah, it is an important point that this has been going on. I'll get to the drug trade there now, which is regarding the Golden Triangle. That's the term that was coined by the CIA, and it was a key actually area of interest for them after the Cold War, when they were kind of looking at the world in that environment, identifying objectives. But the Golden Triangle is an area that's, I want to say it's centered in Myanmar, and then it's the border areas of Thailand, China, and I believe Laos. But 25% of the world's heroin supply is refined in Myanmar. And opium is grown in the hilly regions of Manipur, and it's sent back into Myanmar to be refined into heroin. So these insurgent groups, like I mentioned, the primary way they've been funding themselves in recent decades, I want to say, is primarily through extortion. They extort pretty much the entire cross-border trade between Myanmar and the Indian region through the hilly areas of Manipur. So that's just something I want to bring up. The state government, ever since they've been elected, one of their key initiatives has been to lessen the drug trade. And there's been a lot of police action in these hilly areas. And that's led to allegations that these policies are only affecting a certain group of people, which I don't think is a fair criticism, because yeah, it's just what the police forces identify, that's where the drugs are. And you can see how that could lead to tensions you can see how that could make it harder for police to implement law and order in the state amidst violence. I feel like that's also an important point that needs to be brought up. So yeah, the drug role, and like you mentioned, the central government has been trying to talk to these insurgent groups, and they don't just want to take rash action and disturb what's already, like, all these fault lines that are already there. So there has been political dialogue with these insurgent groups to kind of lead to solutions that benefit everyone.
So the important factor here, what I noticed is that as a community, one is that fault lines exist, not just Metais and Kukis, but also Nagas, and then internally also there are fault lines within each of them. Then there was like a distrust or the trust issue among them. It fueled by all these economic issues, particularly owning the lands, owning the political power. At one end, Cookies have the 90%, probably say that Imphal is only 10% of the land, but 60% or the more population, and then also having the political power. That always has some of the benefits on the development comes into that. At the same time, they felt that not able to get into the hills, buy the land, etc., encroachments, etc., happening. That's one aspect of it. And there are fault lines. Then there are terrorist or the insurgents outfits. They try to take advantage of that for a variety of the reasons, whether it's a separatism or whether it's a also nexus with the drugs, opiums and drugs and all that thing. How it plays is that initially, yes, broader community, it's get into that and then protest and all that thing. But it turned violent in the month of May. And some of these things were also fake news. Like say, I have some of the clippings of the fake news. So I'm just getting the two. This I will share my screen for that. Um, so this is uh, two incidences I'm taking when there are many of the rumors. The first one, and I'm bringing from the both side. All right, the first one, it shows that basically the body of a mutilated girl in a plastic wrapper, and then there was a message that was circulated, and that created the violence. It was saying that a Metai nurse, she was actually raped and then killed, and it's there. But she was not actually Metai. It was a different case from a few years back from Delhi, and then someone just morphed it. So we need to understand who will do this morphing, right? There must be some agenda to fuel either political agenda or some other agenda into that. Now, the another video, the message here, there was a video circulated that this lady, that she was actually tortured by this civilian with the military outfit, and then she was later killed. Now, this was given as projected as a Kuki woman. She was tortured by Metai civilians and then killed. But the video was actually from December 2022 from Myanmar. So, and Myanmar's the whatever the army had also agreed and then condemned that fact. But so this is the example. It means that there are some forces which goes into some videos somewhere, morph them and project as if there is a recent is happening. So that is where it fueling. It could be now this either the insurgent, the drugs, or the separatist, or the political, those who are not happy with the current political government or anything, but bringing it out. So that is the fake news had played a major havoc. Like for example, we all know that very sad and shameful incidents where two Kuki women who actually were stripped naked, and then one of them was molested or even raped, gang raped. So that's the incident. But that the whole thing is then fuels that the first fake news then fuels into another. It get violent. 800,000 Metais then attacks into Kuki village, and then these things happen. It's again, it fuels back. That later on, what we see that the militants playing into that. There are some of the videos you may have seen that like a terrorist dressed like some of this military, but they're having the weapons which are very advanced, AK-47, MP5s, and those they are firing from the height, from the hills, from on the villages. So there are so much videos that we have seen it. So so that is also they are taking advantage, and these are not the ordinary people, right? The tribals, but they are the terrorist, and probably fueled by all these drugs and all that, which contributing into that. So it is very important to understand, and all this factor that I didn't see any kind of a religious aspect of it. You rather, I had seen the statement of even a preacher from Kuki saying that it's not a religious violence or anything. Rather, Metais actually had this the data which are the kind of anecdotal cases saying that Metais also, as I mentioned, that has the churches. So Kukis, when actually attacked Metais, they did not differentiate the place of worship, whether it's a temple or churches are there. So for them, it's a cookies. So it became like a, so they, for cookies, it became Metais, and Metais, it became cookies. So it's like a one tribal entity and not really based on the religious fault lines. But of course, there are majority of the each of them. The majority of the religions are probably Hindus or Christians, but the aspect that is playing in over there is not really fueled by the religious divide, but it's much more tribal or ethnic divisions. And those are basically language, culture, region, history, all these things plays into that. So that's why just as a broader level of observations into that. So with this, I think we are coming to the tail end of this. Of course, a lot can be covered or can be questioned or provided the details about what has been government doing. And but at least I have seen that the reports about the refugee camps and some of the negotiations, bringing out the force to establish the peace, take out the people from the high violence areas or the disturbed areas. So it has been there, but it can be a discussion of separate topics. However, if Spandan or Isha, you want to throw any light onto that, I'm free, feel free. Otherwise, we can open the topics for the further discussion for the wider audience.
I think there's one thing I think we might not have mentioned, the Land Reform Act.
I did mention that
Okay.
Land Reform Act. Are you talking 1960 Land Reform Act?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I did mention that
Okay.
it is one of the things that which restricts the tribal property to be owned by tribals and cannot be transferred out. And that actually has another dissent from the Metais point of view. So. Okay, so with this, I would just summarize that it's a very alarming, very unfortunate, but also very complicated issue, both from the historical, also from the tribal dynamics, and multiple dimensions are there, whether it is a insurgency, whether it is a bringing the political kind of rights or economic prosperity in terms of the affirmative actions, or the drugs angle is there. That all fueled into this one. It is at least a little bit better that the violence is actually getting reduced. It's not yet stopped. It's still sporadic incidences that we are noticing, but it's very important to establish a trust and to make sure that it doesn't get hijacked or trust doesn't get killed because different political aspect or different, whether it's a political or the insurgents, separatist, or even sometimes religious, but there could be different forces who may try to take the advantage of such kind of situation and complicate. They may complicate on the ground, or they can just create a different narratives on a broader stage of the world. So it is important for us to bring out the facts and present the facts as they are. That would really make sure that it's the first step into that, and then create in the long term. We expect that government to establish some trust building initiatives. The first is, of course, to establish the peace, whether it is by negotiation, by enforcement, or separating the population so that the day-to-day violence gets stopped. But in the long term, it's important to establish the trust relationship between them, provide the opportunity to prosper together, live together, address the core issues that are really creating this distrust. And I hope that government and India will take forward. Those are the steps that they are already engaged in. With this, I will pause the kind of this discussion, and I'll open for everybody for bringing out their own perspective and continue the discussion.